Atlantum. "You ready?" came Jevon's soft voice from outside her door. Ambra had already bathed and dressed, relieved to find clothes befitting the occasion laid out on the bed in her room, courtesy of Quill. A simple but elegant white sleeveless top, a pair of soft, loose pants in pale green, and an Indian sari-like garment in royal blue with tiny silver stars embroidered through it, and was now slipping her feet into strappy silver sandals. There was a mother-of-pearl clip on the dressing table, which she used to loosely pin up her wavy, shoulder-length hair. A coral-coloured lip gloss had also been provided, and she swiped a dab of it over her lips before emerging from her quarters. Jevon was waiting, dressed in a fitted royal blue shirt and white pants, the colours setting off his tanned skin and wavy dark hair. Ambra had often wished that she, too, had inherited her mother's olive skin and dark hair, and not her father's light skin and auburn hair. As the siblings stepped out from the windowless blue-green domed rooms where they had arrived in Atlantum, they found themselves on a balcony overlooking an entire city. Ambra's mouth formed an O. She turned to look at Jevon, whose eyes were struggling to take it all in. The majority of the buildings wore cloaks of green vegetation, the hanging gardens scattered with splashes of colour where various plants were flowering or bearing fruit. Ambra inhaled lungfuls of sweet, cool air. A grand, white, onion-domed building gleaming in the centre of the city caught her attention. "That has to be the royal palace," she said, pointing. "Incredible," whispered Jevon. "There must be 500,000 of them living here." Atlantum was constructed across several layers. The lower layer was aquatic, with some of the buildings half submerged, water lapping at their walls. A series of canals ferried watercraft of all kinds, some with cargo, throughout the city. A separate system of water canals enabled the amphibious Ondans to traverse their city by swimming instead of walking if they preferred. Ambra watched as an Ondan with a young child on his back emerged from the water, climbing up a short flight of steps and onto a footpath. At first, he and his child were dripping wet, but by the time he was at the top of the steps, their clothes and hair had dried. The central layer from which Ambra and Jevon surveyed the city was a series of narrow roads and narrower walkways connected by arched bridges over the waterways. The Ondan roads were not roads in the Terran sense, as there were no motorised vehicles, but there were all kinds of wheeled devices from hand-pulled carts to what appeared to be cousins of the Terran bicycle. Looking up, Ambra realised there was an aerial layer to the city, its structures connected by sky bridges and walkways and even a few zip lines. She was glad that she would be able to get about the city without having to use the canals, and tried not to think about the entire structure being in the ocean. Above her, a vast, transparent dome let in the sun and the blue sky overhead. It was well after midday right now, which by Ambra's reckoning meant they were in a time zone and therefore a location not far from home. As she scanned the dome, she spied something that caused her breath to catch in her throat. Despite being enclosed, the city's atmosphere was fresh ocean air, as the dome was fitted with multiple vents that could be opened or closed as needed. Ambra clutched Jevon's arm, pointing to the vents. "Why would they need vents that close? They don't seriously take this thing under the water, do they?" "Hello," came a call from below them, saving Jevon from having to answer. Quill was beckoning them down the stairs that led down to the street from their quarters. The siblings joined Quill, following him along the streets and paths of Atlantum. All the street and building signs are in both English and Ondan. Everyone in Onda speaks English, and many of us speak 2 or more Terran languages. "Hang on, if Ondans can't visit Terra for any length of time, how did you learn our languages?" asked Jevon. "We have had researchers and scientists from many countries spend time here over the years, including your mother," said Quill. "She has been learning from our scientists, who have developed an advanced technique related to her field, and we are as keen to learn from Terrans as they are to learn from us, though a condition of such visits was that they were sworn to secrecy, a promise they were prepared to keep in order to protect us, and to enable their return visits to Atlantum." Crossing a narrow footbridge that spanned a canal, they emerged into a square where groups of Ondans were enjoying lunch, relaxing, and socialising under leafy trees. Ambra inhaled the scent of orange blossom and the garden beds full of flowers that were dotted throughout the square. A fountain played at the far edge of the square, the water cooling and moistening the air. At the centre of the square was a tall obelisk of white marble carved with Ondan characters. At the top of the structure was embedded a timepiece fashioned from burnished steel and precious metals. "Wow! What is this? Some kind of artwork?" asked Ambra. "It is certainly a work of art, but its function is as a long-range clock, designed to keep accurate time for 10,000 years. Rather than measuring time hour by hour, it ticks once a year. The hand moves forward once every 100 years. And on the millennium, a cuckoo comes out," explained Quill. Ambra laughed. "That's a long time to wait for a cuckoo. Why would anyone build such a strange clock?" "One of the Terrans who visited built it in conjunction with our craftspeople. It is called the Clock of the Long Now, and it is intended to stretch out our short-term thinking. Just as the Terran astronauts took a picture of our Earth from space and unleashed an idea of a bigger here, this clock encourages us to think about a longer now, longer than the next week, next quarter, next year, even the next generation." "What are those other things besides the numbers, those orbs? Are those stars?" asked Jevon. "This clock keeps track of time not only in our current cultural sense, but also natural time, the solar and lunar cycles, and the precession of the equinoxes through the zodiac, which is a cycle of about 26,000 years. Ambra gazed upwards at the clock, trying to imagine life on Earth that far into the future. Exiting through the square, they ascended a staircase that wound around the outside of a tower, arriving on a rooftop with a shaded balcony where they stopped to admire the view over the city. Ambra craned her neck and waved towards the top of the dome. "How can you have the sunlight coming into the city if you can't be out in the sun?" "We are surface dwellers, so we can tolerate the light to some extent, and our dome protects us from direct sunlight. The intensity of sunlight in Atlantum is much less than actually being under the sun. See how it is more of a glow instead of a bright light that makes you squint? No Ondan needs sunglasses." Quill smiled. He pointed at the dome. "It's made of material that filters out harmful ultraviolet light, which is the main problem, especially after the Terrans thinned out the ozone layer and created a hole over the South Pole in the summer. Yet we prefer to stay in the Southern Hemisphere, where there is much more ocean and much less chance of being detected." Climbing down from the tower, they passed a small shop where stacked copies of the main Ondan newspaper, the Raw Prawn, were on display. Ambra could not read the Ondan characters, but Quill stopped to pick up a copy. "2 tetzels, please," said the shopkeeper pleasantly, as Quill fumbled in the small purse he kept strung about his neck. He handed over 2 tiny gold coins, then flipped the folded paper out. He frowned at the headline. "What is it?" asked Jevon. Though she couldn't make out what the article was about, Ambra saw the accompanying photograph. An ornate stone bridge over a river in a city somewhere. She felt sure she had seen it before, perhaps in a book, but couldn't quite place it. "Nothing to worry about," said Quill, his frown dissolving into a smile as he folded the paper. "Let me show you around the royal palace before the banquet tonight."